Kim Fields was on the Dean Cole podcast. And what was interesting on that podcast is that Dean asked her, "Hey, Kim, you're probably one of the last ones that made it out of the 80s that were sober and you didn't party and things like that. What do you think kept you on the straight and narrow?" And she talked about how she felt like her castmates and the people that she knew were trying to protect her. And I want to have a conversation about it. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. And, what's striking to me, I grew up with Kim Fields and things like that. You grew up watching her, grew up watching all of the Black television shows. And I'm going to say something, and it might upset a lot of people. And for that, I apologize in advance. But what I'm going to say is this: I feel like Kim Fields, Janet Jackson, all the girls that were on the Cosby Show, I feel like that was the last of the Black television princess era. And it makes me so sad to say this. Like, we do not, as a Black community, we do not have any Black television princesses, people that we grew up with, people that feel like family to us, sisters, even, you know people that we want to see grow and prosper and do well. I feel like, and you guys know, anybody who's followed me for a long time, I've talked to you guys quite a bit about my dissertation study and how, like, the Cosby family, the Cosby show was the beacon of hope for a lot of Black women, especially Black women who grew up in abusive families. They looked to that for social, emotional, relationship, behavioral cues on how to model what to aspire to do. And, the facts of life and all those shows like that. Kim Fields is like the Black princess. And I, and I know that we talk about parasocial relationships and things like that. And maybe I'm guilty of that with talking about her like this here. But I remember when, Miss Kim Fields, she went on the Atlanta Housewives. And, back then I loved the cast of the Atlanta Housewives. Don't get me wrong. But as soon as I saw her on there, I was like, no, get her away from those girls. Those are not the kind of girls that Miss Kim Fields needs to be around, because no, 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 get her out of there. Whoever's decision it was to put her on this show, please undo this decision and please get her out of there, because she does not belong with those girls. And I felt like it was such a wrong fit, and it was almost like a betrayal. And I think the reason is because when you have, these people with these good girl images, and even people who sort of, even model that outside of television, like they're a good person. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the other girls aren't, but they can definitely be toxic. And while they could be fun, and it can certainly be great for television ratings, those girls are toxic on the Housewives. I'm just going to tell it like it is. And I feel like that is something, having a good Black girl with a good image is something that we've lost. And on television, in media, just in general, from start to finish. I'm not talking about one good role here and one good role there. I'm talking about start to finish, people that we grew up to be, people that are aspiring, that are role models on and off television, and quiet is kept. My generation has a lot to thank the Cosby Show for that. So much so that I actually agree, and again, no disrespect here, but I know that there was, or at least I've heard that there was creative conflict around leaving, someone, Lisa Bonet's character on the show, Denise, on A Different World, because she had gotten pregnant, and that was not a good fit. They did not want that happening on the show, and that is if that's true, that's actually a creative decision that I agree with. I think, personally in television, if they never show another teenage pregnancy, another Black girl teenage pregnancy, a pregnancy out of wedlock, I'm totally okay with that. And I don't think that Black children need to see that anymore. I'm glad that Theo didn't get somebody knocked up. I'm glad, so I'm glad that there were like a lot of things, a lot of messages that we didn't get to see. And there were things that were wholesome, about these characters on television, because there wasn't a whole lot of that to begin with, just in general. But I definitely think just throughout television, Kim Fields, Janet Jackson, the girls from the Cosby Show. That's the last era of our Black television princesses, and I think that that's something. No one can touch that. No one can take that from us, for all of us who grew up in the 80s. And there tried to be duplications like, yeah, like Family Matters and other shows, but those shows didn't compete, and they never compared, and they never gave us that. And I'm so glad that her castmates, I don't know if they idolized her or put her up on a pedestal, or that she was also the beacon of hope for them as well, because you can very much work with people and they can provide hope for you, and they don't want you harmed. And I think that that's really astounding, and I think that speaks volumes to maybe who she is or who she was. And not only to that, but also to those her castmates who chose not to involve her in that, because they had that level of respect for her. And I think this is something just, for this is why I don't watch Black television anymore, or just television in general, because I think it's more than just a movie. It's more than just a show. It's actually a message, and it can definitely inspire girls and boys, to do better. And I'm so glad in a world where Black girls are preyed upon, that they definitely protected her. And she saw it that way, as they protected her and they shielded her. And I'm so glad, because that is something that we just don't see very much of today, or we don't hear about as much, of today. And you guys, I've talked to you about abuse, but I think it's a great thing when you have other people that are protective of her in what she represents. And I'm certainly not saying that people don't make mistakes and people don't make decisions, and lives turn out differently and things like that. What I'm saying is that we definitely, what Tyler Perry and John Singleton and all these people that have produced all these Black films and things like that, they've never been able to give us a Black princess from start to finish. And that, unfortunately, that show from back then, those shows from back then were the only shows that were able to do that. I think Thelma from Good Times is also one of our Black princesses, and that, we just, even though she grew up in the hood of Chicago, Cabrini Green projects, she is still very much a Black princess, for us, at least for me anyway. So I won't group everybody into it, but I know for me, but I know all of the girls, in women, and even Felicia Rashad, she was more like, a Black queen, Black mother, that I know for us, that is very much, that show is very much a landscape. And those actresses and those actors are very much a landscape that we want to protect. And, even when, Malcolm Jamal Warner passed, a little while ago, that was very hurtful. That was very, because he was like a Black prince, right? And that was very hurtful. It was like a brother was gone, and so I think, that's very powerful. And it's just something I wanted to share my thoughts on. Thanks so much.